Hello everybody, and welcome to AP Lazer Workshop. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to be working with some acrylic, and we're going to be creating a multi-layer engraving and cutout and actually running a sample on that. Just want to let everybody know that feel free to ask questions as we go along. We will be doing a Q&A at the end of the session, and that's when I'll be answering all the questions. If you're able to, go ahead and just write those questions down as we're working along though, and we'll get to them as soon as we get finished up. To start, what we're going to do is we're going to talk first about material and the types of acrylic that we have. There are two different types of acrylic. There is cast acrylic and there's extruded acrylic. And I have examples of both. Cast acrylic is what works really well for engraving. You get this really nice white frosted kind of look to it. With the extruded, it doesn't do so much, and you gotta get like almost a gray kind of engraving like we have here. The extruded, on the other hand, does a great job with cutting and is actually able to do a flame polished edge on the cutting. To where cast, while works well for engraving, doesn't do so well for cutting. It still cuts very nicely, but you can get a little bit of ridges or hardness on the cut itself. So when you're working, you're setting things up, it's real important to know what type of acrylic that you have and make sure that it's the type for what you're trying to achieve, whether you're just doing some cutouts or you're doing engraving or you're going to be doing both. Today we're going to be actually using the cast acrylic, and we're going to be doing an engraving and a cutout. So we're going to go ahead and jump over to our program here, and we're going to talk about different types of files, and we're going to walk through on setting up a file for this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to open up my CorelDRAW program. CorelDRAW is the program that we typically use for setting up vector images, things like logos, line art, just simple text, things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and start a new document here. And I'm going to go ahead and name this acrylic cutout. I'm going to come down to my working area here, and I have a pre-cut piece of cast acrylic of 6 by 6. Now my DPI resolution here doesn't matter too much. Because we're going to be dealing with a vector image, the vector images are very versatile, and the DPI that we're using, it's now not so much set in stone like it is when we're dealing with photographs. Typically what I use is a 300 DPI or an interval of a 0.003 for my DPI and my interval. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK here. And so here we are with our working area. What I want to talk about next is files and file types. It's a question that the techs get asked a lot of questions on. What is an acceptable file? What's the difference between these kind of files? When you're dealing with files, you're going to come across a wide range of them. You have different file types like JPEGs, EPS files, SVG files, BMP files, things like that. While almost all of our files are able to be used with our program, I normally try to stick with EPS files. They're the most easiest to use. They're pretty much ready to go files, and I'm going to go ahead and import one of these now. So import. Now an EPS file is an encapsulated photo script. And it's a good choice for high resolution vector graphics and are typically created within Adobe or Corel. Now, one that I see a lot of customers using are typical SVG files, which are a scalable vector graphic. With that kind of format, it's basically a two-dimensional graphic that's supported with the intention of animation such as GIFs and work real well with websites and online documentation. And then we've always got our wonderful JPEG, which are kind of the low rung as far as files go. They're considered raster files, so they're very pixelated, and while there's certain things we can do to clean them up, they don't always work out the best. This here is an EPS file that I went ahead and purchased off of Big Stock. And at the end of our class, I'm going to go ahead and give you guys a nice long list of different websites to go to for different types of imagery. So with this EPS file here that I've brought in, you can see when I zoom in, it's really smooth. Real nice. I don't see any jagginess to it. I don't see any pixelation, and that's really what I'm looking for. Now, just because this comes in and it's nice and smooth does not necessarily mean that this file is ready to go. You always want to just double check things out with your file to make sure that you don't have any overlapping lines, there's nothing hidden within it. And let me give you kind of an example of what I'm talking about. I'm going to go ahead and scale this down to kind of fit it within my 6x6 working area here. And you can kind of see that when I grab this to move this around, I have a box around it. And that's one of the things I'm talking about where things may be hidden. So a good way to identify that is to first come over to your Properties tab or Docker. If you don't have a Properties tab here, you can come up to Window, down to Dockers, and then just check mark what you're looking for here. Another way you can do that is come over here to the right-hand side where my other Dockers are, hit my plus sign, and I can add it that way as well. So with my Properties Dockers selected, I'm going to come up here to my fill, and I'm going to hit my white X to drop the fill out. Now, of course, my whole image goes away because I don't have any kind of outline around it. So right next to my fill is my outline tool. And so I'm going to add in just a hairline there. So here we can see that invisible box. Now, if I had just taken this and I had sent this out as a DXF file, what's going to happen is that that box is going to kind of get in the way. So what I want to do is I want to actually get rid of that. Two ways that I can do that. I can either ungroup this and just get rid of the box here, which is the quickest, simplest way here. So I'm going to make sure my image is selected. I'm going to go up to Object, down to Grouping, Ungroup. Then I can just select my box here and hit Delete. So there goes my invisible line there. So next I want to kind of inspect my image to make sure that I don't have any overlapping lines or anything that may affect my engraving or my cutout. I'm just going to kind of breeze through here, looking around. And this is right here is what I'm kind of just talking about. We can see where these lines are kind of circled around and overlapping here. Right here, and it looks like we have a little bit up here. Now, if I select all of this and I try to use my welding tool, what's going to end up happening is I'm going to get rid of all of this stuff on the inside and I'm only going to be left with an outline. So what I actually want to do is use what's called a segment delete tool. Over on the left-hand side toolbar, the bottom or towards the top, the third option down is my crop tool. And if I hit this little black triangle in the corner, it brings up my submenu. This is where I can select my virtual segment delete. So what this is going to do is allow me to come in here and then just slice off these little sections that I don't want. Now we can see how that's kind of made my paw a little bit bigger. And so what we're going to do, we're going to expand this up a little bit more. Thin out that line a little bit. Add in a hairline. There we go there. So then I'm going to come up to my other one, snip it right there. And then over here as well. Now, if you notice that once I've done that, I've kind of gotten rid of some of these other lines that I had set to hairline. So I'm going to make this a hairline again, just to thin out all my lines. And there we go. So what you want to be aware of is when I use the segment delete, you can see that we have this little notch here where things aren't quite connected. Now, if we sent this out, this could cause, again, issues with our engraving. So what we actually want to do is join our curves. Again, I've got my join curves tab right here. And I'm going to go ahead and select my image, and I'm going to zoom in so we can see a little bit better of what this is actually doing. So when I have my join curves selected, I have a few different options on how I can actually join these. And over to this right, onto the right-hand side here, this little dialog box, I can see the nodes, and it's showing me how it's going to connect those two nodes, or these two lines right here. So I have an extend, a chamfer, a fillet, and a curve. I typically go with the extend, and I make my gap tolerance really small. So I'm going to do a 0.005 tolerance. And I'm just going to hit apply here. Now once I hit apply, you'll notice here how these lines are just going to join together. And we're calculating. And just like that. And we'll come over and check our other side. And looks like our lines are all connected here as well. I'm going to go ahead and minimize my image again. I'm just going to kind of shrink it down, fit it back into my 6x6 working area. I can also come over here to the top, and I can lock my ratio, and I can change my sizes here. When I lock my ratio, if I change my height, it will automatically adjust my width so my image doesn't distort at all. We're going to have a 6x6 working area, so I'm going to make this just a little bit smaller and do like a 5.8. Just give me a little bit of wiggle room around the edges here. Now, I can send this file out and engrave it and cut it with the same file. Now, if I do that, that means that I have to select this outside line here and change the color to it, which can affect the way my photo engraves. Now, if I don't want to do that, what I can do is I can actually add in what's called a contour or an offset to the outside here. So I'm again going to make sure that my image is ungrouped. I'm going to come up to Object, and I'm going to break my curve apart. This is what's going to allow me just to select this outside feather area. And I'm going to come over to my right docker where I've got my contour selected already. Again, you can hit the plus sign here or come up to Window and Dockers and add it in there. So when I bring up my contour alignment, I can do a contour on the outside of that shape, the inside of the shape, or to center. We'll have later videos talking about the to center one here and the inside. But for this aspect, I'm going to choose the outside. The number of steps is how many more lines I'm going to have on the outside. And I just want one line. And the offset is going to be the distance between my original line and the one that I'm creating. I'm going to go with an offset of a 0.05 and hit apply. And so we can see how it's just added in another line around our feathers and our wings and around our feet here. So from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and export this out. So I'm going to go to File and Export. And I want it to be a DXF AutoCAD, and I'm going to place it right on top of my desktop here. When you're setting out your DXF file, the CAD version in CorelDRAW is always going to pop up. We typically want an AutoCAD R14. We want to export our units in inches. Export text as curves. We never want to do text, even if we are just exporting text. What can happen is it makes it a really hard, jagged line and not so smooth. Typically, once we export out of CorelDRAW, again, even as text, and it goes out as a DXF. It is no longer a text, it is an actual object, which is why we want this curves. I've got my bitmap as a BMP, and unfilled or color does not matter. And we're going to go ahead and hit OK. So from here, I can actually bring it into my RDWorks program. So I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to go to File and Import. I'm going to look on my desktop. And there's my file right there. So right now, when I bring it in, everything was layered in a color of black. And so over here in my mode, I have my black layer set to scan for my engrave. I'm actually going to unclick off my object here, and I'm going to select just this outside wing, that contour that I created. And with that selected, I'm going to come down here to my color bar, and I'm just going to select another color, which is going to assign that line a new layer that I can set for cut. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and double click on my scan mode here to bring up my parameter settings. Our recommendation on setting for speed and power is a 30 speed and a 19 power. And again, I'm going to run this with a 300 dpi or an interval of a 0.0033. Hit OK. Come over to our blue layer, which is our cut layer, and we're going to run a speed of 1, a max power of 95, and a min power of 93. Hit OK. I'm going to go ahead and double check my origin. So I'm going to go up to Config, System Settings, and I've got my origin set for center. So with all this set here, I'm going to go ahead and power on my machine and get this file sent over. So I'm powering on my machine, and while my laser head here resets, I'm going to jump back over and just quickly download my file. All right, our file is downloaded. Now what we're going to be working with today is, like I said, I have a piece of 6x6 extruded acrylic we're going to be engraving on, and I'm actually going to be using my 3-inch lens. If you don't have a 3-inch lens, a 2-inch lens will work perfectly fine. I just wanted to spice it up a little bit here. If you don't have the 3-inch lens, what I would recommend doing is purchasing one of our lens kits. What the lens kit is going to do is offer you the 3-inch lens, a 4-inch lens, a replacement 2-inch lens, which is the standard lens that comes with all of our machines, and then an 1.5 inch lens, which is for real fine detail kind of work. Now, when you're working with acrylic, you want to make sure that you're in a nice open area and that you've got great ventilation. With acrylic, it can give off a small odor that can make you nauseous slightly, give you a little bit of headache, maybe some watery eyes. If any of those things happen, just make sure to step outside, step away from the project. Don't leave your machine running unattended though. Especially with acrylics, when you're doing cutouts and things like that, they do have a tendency to flare up. If a flare-up does happen and you are not there to stop the machine, you can cause a fire inside of there. So always safety first. So with my piece of acrylic in, I've already got my 3-inch lens installed. I'm going to bring my laser head over and focus in here. Looks like I'm a little high. All right, looks good. I'm going to make sure that my material is nice and straight here by just bringing my laser head down and running my laser head back and forth. Then going to bring it up to kind of my center position. One step that I did forget to do that happens occasionally is I did forget to mark out my center. So that's the nice benefit about our system here though, is I can bring my laser head up to the center, I can hit origin, and I can hit frame to make sure that I'm staying within my working area. So I can see I'm just slightly high, so I'm just going to nudge down just a little bit, re-origin, and hit frame again. And there we are, spot on. I'm going to go ahead and close my lid here. Now it's going to get a little bit loud. I do apologize about that, but I do, again, need to turn on my ventilation just to make sure that I'm staying safe. And we're going to go ahead and hit start. Now, typically if you're working with things like text or you are working with a logo or anything like that, what I would recommend is actually mirroring your image within RDWorks. That way it actually engraves backwards, so when you open this up and you look at the front side of it, it's going to be nice and smooth. Now with this eagle here, because it is just kind of a floating eagle, it wasn't absolutely necessary to do that, but I do want to point that out and give you that option. All right, our project's done. I'm going to give it just a couple seconds here. I'm going to slide my laser head out of the way just to let it get out the last little bit of those vapors and smoke. All right, go ahead and open it up here. Take my cutout piece here. Now what I'm going to use to clean this with here is some paper towel, a little bit of Windex, and a magic eraser. So I'm first just going to take my paper towel here and I'm going to knock off most of this dust that I have on here. Go ahead and spray it with just a little bit of Windex here. And then use my magic eraser just to kind of go through and clean her up a little bit. And then we're going to go ahead and peel our backing off. All right. While we're waiting for some questions, I did say that I would give you a list of places to go for different types of imagery. One of the ones we use here at AP Lazer is a website called Big Stock, which great place to get photographs, vector images, things like that. Another one is, I got a list here. Shutterstock is a great place to go, along with iStock. If you're looking for something specific and just want one single image, a little bit inexpensive place to go, actually, believe it or not, is Etsy. Now, when you do go to Etsy, just keep an eye out. Again, look out for the difference between like the SVG files, anything that they're saying is ready to go. You just want to make sure that you double check that before sending the file to the laser. Make sure that you're looking for DXF, SVGs, even JPEGs, BMPs are files that we can all work with, and we'll have some later videos on how to take a JPEG and convert it over and everything like that. Jenny's asking, when buying an image, is it DXF best? It can be. That is a file that you can pretty much take right into the machine. DXF files don't always give you the capability of editing them correctly, so I would just keep an eye out for that. I believe Etsy has a spot to leave comments and questions and things like that to the people you are purchasing it from. I would always make sure to reach out to them. The more formats you can get, the better you are off. If you want to edit an SVG, with SVG files, you can edit them. They are probably going to give you a little bit more headaches than an EPS file, or even taking like a JPEG and trying to trace a JPEG or a BMP file. Again, I would just go with caution. The more file types that you're able to get out at one purchase, the better. I've been on there myself and have purchased quite a few images off of Etsy, for example, and that's typically what I look for, is the different formats. So if they're offering it to me in a DXS, SVG, EPS, or even a JPEG format, those are typically the ones that I want to stick with. Okay, as always, our technicians are always standing by, so if you have any questions about file types, you have any questions about acrylics, setting files up, please feel free to reach out to us. That number again is 844-364-8211. All right, thanks everybody. Have a great day.